Curtis got out of his little trip to the convalescence home. Old man Curtis had to rejuvenate after long draft coverage. But I'm back. I feel great. So I want to get into why I am so high. And I think you should be very high on Jordan Phillips. He's not the old Jordan Phillips, totally different player. And while the pass rush athleticism was higher with Jordan Phillips, much better aspects are with this Jordan Phillips. And I did not really have him high on my radar. I wasn't digging that back deep into the D-tackle group, and I should have. Once we drafted him, though, and I saw his rare, genetically rare, almost superhuman strength, and started digging into him, I became a quick fan within a matter of 5 minutes. And I'd been talking about how he pressed 365 over his head and how 365 is only 110 pounds off the world record. But he actually did it twice. Not once, but twice. So his max lift is actually probably about 30 pounds, 40 pounds heavier than that. That is mind-blowing. And when you understand that the bench press, it can be indicative of strength, but not really. It's not correlative because Eichenberg had 33 and Calais Campbell only had 18. It really just focuses on technique in one part. The squat, which he did 660, and now the military press was a whole body exercise to move that weight, is far more indicative of strength. But there's more to that. I understand clearly this guy is not a stat monger. He's not going to generate huge stats. But you have to understand, and I've been talking to it for a few years, that football is a team game. It's a superhero team. Each unit, mostly it's very easy to translate that on the offensive and defensive line. And so while his production might not be off the charts, his influence, his impact on the guys around him and the unit could be tremendous. And that is massive. One of the most influential guys in the NFL who really didn't get a lot of talking about was Michael Pierce for the Ravens. And he was an undrafted free agent. These guys fall because people want that pass rush. They want those athletic flashes. And not every system can use these guys. And so they have a tendency to fall. But Michael Pierce, who now retired, was extraordinarily influential. And I think, I'm not sure if he can have that same impact, but you never know. But his influence on the trenches, especially on that A gap, and then transcending to the B gap and to the rest of his players that are really good players to wrap around his skill set, is tremendous. So I want to dig into that with a little bit of film, tiny bit. Ryder McConville did a really good job. Go check him out for an overview and look at Phillips's abilities. And there's one clip in there I think he should cut into a short because it was so funny. I'll get into that a little bit as well. Going to use some images to show you some stuff and then kind of flesh out this understanding of the influence he has by comparing him versus other guys in the pit, the A and B gap, the guards and centers of the rest of the division, and how that can translate to big stuff, big stats, big production for guys like Sela, guys like Chop, guys like Grant, who we got here, and guys like Chubb. And Phillips, too, when he comes back. So that's what I'm going to be doing today here, guys. If you see a bunch of cuts on my face, I was watching some old Western movies, and I saw them using a straight razor. So it was my first day using a straight razor. And it teaches you a lot to be patient and take your time or you pay. And I got gutted 3 times. So I didn't get beat up on my wife or anything like that. So anyway, a lot of the comparisons that we're getting with Phillips is DJ Jones from the Broncos. And I think there is some fair comparisons, but not so much. I want to get in quickly to what DJ Jones does. He's been a solid player playing that same nose tackle role. If you look at his stats, his combine numbers, he had 25 bench press. Phillips had 29. He certainly doesn't have the rest of these lift potentials, so he's much stronger. They weighed about the same in the combine. But the shuttle run, which is an important one, real important one, 4.65. Each had 4.65. So both have a nice little area movement despite being that size. Now the 3-cone drill is another big one. DJ Jones got 7.76 and an 8.9 for Phillips. So Phillips is a little restrictive. We have to understand that, but it is not a killing blow. But if you look at some of the explosive numbers, Benito Jones, I get to Benito Jones. I want to compare him to Benito Jones. The vertical jump was 28.5 for DJ Jones, 31 for Phillips. The broad jumps were the same at 9. So both DJ ran the 40 and then Phillips didn't. I understand probably why. But this kid Phillips has some of the nice metrics of Jones as far as explosion and a little bit better, maybe not so much in the shuttle, but this kid has a little bit of movement, but it's the power, but also the stance. Stance sets up a lot, and when you see how this kid sets up in his pre-snap stance, it's pretty bizarre, but it is very, very effective. Now, Benito Jones, I'm going to throw him in there roughly. He didn't do the bench. 8.21 for the cone, which was they were about the same weight too at the time. Jones was about the same weight. So Benito, when he came in, he weighed 316, which is all about the same. He's bulked up to 350 because he needs to add the weight to compensate for the lack of strength. But Jones, he didn't do the broad jump. His vertical was 26. Again, 31 for Phillips, so much more explosion. The cone drill, I think I just mentioned, is about the same. The shuttle was 5.27 for Benito, 4.65 for Phillips. That's a big gap. Phillips is a much more talented player just in the physical aspects, but the power. Benito is 6'1", DJ Jones 6'1", and Phillips is 6'2". And this plays a part because leverage is all about leverage. Leverage is like a fulcrum. You don't have to give as much when you have more leverage. And the shorter you are, to an extent, as long as the size and the power is relative, it's a huge asset. And most of the guys he's going to be going against in this division, he's going to have a leverage and strength edge. But his height, while that is an advantage, his stance is something else. And it shows some really, really good ability to be flexible and to come out of a really rare kind of stance. Look at his stance here. The wide base, the wider your legs are when you start, the harder it is to knock you off from your left to right, from you getting blasted from the side. And this is going to go a long way towards him actually getting lower coming out of his stance, because when you get inside, you got big legs, it's very difficult. But when you bring your stance out like that, you can drop even lower, and it gives you more leverage to absorb those angle blocks. So that is, look at that stance. This is a guy is an athlete, and he's got some flexibility. And you can see it again here, not as wide, but still extraordinarily low. And I want to show, this was on Ryder McConneville's. He was so funny during it. Well, look, you see the jump right there? That is hilarious. And he controls himself, jumps, and still is there, and then gets back in for the tackle. And Ryder does a much funnier job in his podcast on this one, but that is not easy. That is something you don't normally see. Here's another one. I want to show you this one, and you can see how the leverage plays out. He gets underneath this guy, and look at him just drive the guy back. Pick him up, drive him back right into the quarterback, and it starts with getting underneath those pads. And when you lift the guy, it takes away all his power. And then when you start adding the power that he has, the power he's taking away from his opponent, you're going to get a lot of collapsing on that A gap. And interior pressure is the most critical pressure. So this guy brings something very, very different. Now, I want you to understand that his ability to really dominate the center. And I'm sure it's going to be something teams consider, OCs consider. But when he gets some film, and if he could start dominating like he has, they're going to have to provide help. And the more help they provide, then that flows down the line of scrimmage. And so it's kind of like a suction. If you have a nose tackle that's pulling the help on the interior, the thinner it gets on the help on the exterior. And when you got a guy like Phillips, you got a guy like Chubb, you got a guy like Chop, you got a guy like Seal, and you got a guy like Grant, all of a sudden they're being forced, if they want to attack an interior, and I've talked about how the A and B gap is critical. Pass balance, running inside. Look at the Bills, how they thrived off the inside run. And when they didn't get it, they got off schedule and they got out of sorts. And so his ability to dominate, control, drive, and suck in help will free everybody up to give them the stats. And he might not look like he's doing a lot, but you go look at Michael Pierce, his stats weren't off the charts, but everybody who watched film and understood knew that his influence, his impact was so far beyond the production. I'm not saying he's going to be Michael Pierce, but there's shades of that. There's possibilities in that. So I want to go look at some of the guys in our division that we've got to beat. You've got to be physical. You've got to control the trenches. It seemed like that was like a crazy talk for a couple of years, but we all know that's true now. But you got to win your division. And when you get guys like this, and if he does what he's supposed to do, or we hope he can do, it's going to force the opposing division GMs to have to compensate, the OCs to have to compensate. And immediately when they're reacting to what you are and what you're doing, it gives you the initiative, and that gives you the advantage. And that's what it's all about, folks. So if you go look at the Patriots, I think they're doing a pretty darn good job. I'm a little uncertain. We'll see about Campbell. I think he could do it, but if he doesn't, it's a big problem. But you go look, Garrett Bradbury, he's a pretty decent run blocker, 6'3", 300. So he's not a bad run blocker, not really so good at the pass blocking, but he's going to have a little struggles. Cole Strange is a guy that they want to start at either the guard or center. He struggles tremendously in the run game, and he's 6'5", 310, and you can see it's just not even close. He is going to need help. You go look at Wes Schweitzer, 6'4", 300. He's going to need help. You look at Michael Onwenu is going to be somebody I think he's going to struggle with or have to really battle with. 6'3", 350, pretty good run block. That's a guy there. Ty Robinson, another guy they got, 6'3", 317. But these guys are going to feel the impact of his power. Onwenu will help. But you'll see some of these other division opponents, they don't have the same advantage. Let's get to the Buffalo Bills. And if you start inside, Connor McGovern's a pretty darn good center, but he's 6'5", 318. It's going to be very difficult for him to compensate those 3 inches. And then the lower stance and coming out, he's probably going to need help. I've seen him moved a lot. You could see in the playoff game against the Chiefs, they really struggled with the tush push, and that was part of it. Cyrus Torrance, 6'5", 347, big guy, but he didn't have a good year in run blocking, but he's going to also have to struggle with the leverage. I think the kid's going to step up. That could be somebody that could give Phillips a little problem. You got David Edwards, 6'6", 308. He is going to struggle to move him as well. Now you get to the Jets, El New York Jetso, and they've got a nice little offensive line there. And but Joe Tittman is a pretty darn good run blocker and a pretty darn good center, 6'6", 310. That's a lot of leverage to have to compensate, especially against a guy this powerful. Myers, backup center, 6'5", 310. He's going to have problems. Joe Simpson, 6'4", 330 is a guy I think can match up well with him. But then Elijah Vera Tucker, 6'5", 308. He's going to have to give his all. And it's something I talked about is when you run inside zone or you're running outside zone or you have there's a tendency to have to double block the center and the guard, take one D tackle, and then that guard or the center peels to the second level. Now the problem is when that guard or center, depending on the alignment of the interior guy, he gets into the defensive tackle, he's got to pass him off, and he's supposed to hit him to set up the original blocker a little bit better, and then he goes to the second level. But the more that guard or center has to give, they lean more and more into it, and they get attached. And it takes them a little longer to reset and get to the next level. And with that broad stance, that low height and strength, I expect a lot of these guys are going to get attached to Phillips, and that's going to slow down that second level move. It's going to clog things up more. They might have to stay attached to control this kid if he's as good as we hope. And that will go a long way to freeing up the linebackers to get in there and have that open lane. It's going to go a long way to having Grant, who's exceptional at one-on-one. And if you have Benito there, they can handle him with one guy mostly. They don't really get attached. And that means they're going to be able to affect a double maybe on Grant more, spend more time on the second level. But it's going to open up everybody along this front. And that double attachment is something I'm very excited to see. So I do think this kid has unbelievable potential because this strength is not normal. This strength is as exceptional as a 4.28 40. This strength is, and adding into the height, if he had been 6'5", 6'6", I'd be less amazed. But being 6'2" and having that stance a little bit lower, this kid has a true chance to be maybe Michael Pierce light, to be a Rock of Gibraltar, to alter the hot cycle. And the cycle is what is working in the NFL? What's the sweet spot to get things off? And that is attacking the A and B gap to open everything up, to create leverage. The more resilience you have in that A and B gap on your defensive line, the less focus and commitment and coming up of the linebackers and everybody else. And so I expect or hope or dream that Phillips will have this influence across the entire unit. And it might take some time, but because of the elite strength, and he's noted to be one of the best run defenders, this kid will come in and spell stuff. Tush push is going to be hard. You're going to have him and Benito is a big guy. So you can have a lot of variances on your looks. You can come in with Benito and Phillips, and then you can play Grant and Sealer out in that wide position for a four-man look, and that will allow you the wall to put even a lighter unit behind you. More speed on first downs and shorts or questionable downs, that 2nd and 5, 3rd and 3, and 3rd and 4. So this kid's development, I think, is huge for us. I believe that this kid can be a very good player. I wouldn't say great. His influence, maybe if he becomes I think he should tack on another 20 pounds or 15 pounds. I'd say tack on 15 pounds, get to the 330 mark. And this kid could be unbelievable. And if you look at it, all his weight is down at the bottom. He's got the upper body, so it's not just an upper body guy that's got imbalance where he's easily teetered. It's a strong lower frame attached to a strong upper frame. So I'm extremely excited about this kid. I hope you are too. Please like, subscribe, and comment, all that stuff. Keeps Curtis in the biz. I'm going to get to the guard we drafted. I'm still working on his name. And it's a lot of stuff attached to that, questions. So I want to dial that in before I do that. But that will be my next podcast. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Curtis saying, be well, go Fins. Curtis out. Start building your own online sportsbook today by getting signed up with acebread.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.